everyone. Tonight we're walking into a quiet afternoon that changes course with just one knock at the door. The kettle is already on, the curtains are drawn against the sharp light, and the clock is marking time in that patient way it does when nothing urgent is expected. And here's a quick reality check. If you think a generous bank transfer can replace showing up in person, you might not survive the first 5 minutes of this story. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I create here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan for some gentle background noise, and let's begin tonight's journey. I was folding laundry when the knock came firm, rhythmic, and too deliberate to be the postman. I opened the door to find Nathaniel, my grandson, framed against the late afternoon sun. He wore a tailored navy jacket that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, but his smile was easy enough. "Surprise, Grandma," he said, stepping in without waiting for me to invite him. Thought I'd check in. We settled at the kitchen table, and before I could ask about his life in the city, he leaned forward. "So, is the $8,000 a month helping you?" The question landed heavier than he realized, not rude exactly, but pointed as if he expected a certain kind of gratitude. Quirky fact: the same words can sound like kindness or accounting, depending on the weight behind them. Joke 1. Some gifts come wrapped in ribbon, some in spreadsheets. I poured him tea and considered my answer. "It helps," I said slowly, "but not as much as this does." I gestured between us. "Your time, your presence." His brow furrowed, not in offense, but in the faint confusion of someone who's been measuring generosity with the wrong ruler. Nathaniel sipped his tea like it was something he didn't quite know what to do with. Old age wisdom. You can tell how comfortable someone is by how they hold a mug. Both hands mean they're open. One hand on the handle means they're keeping their coat on. I figured the money would cover everything he said, eyes scanning my small kitchen like he was doing a mental inventory. The mismatched mugs, the curtain I'd mended twice, the old radio humming in the corner. "It covers bills," I said, "and a little more." "But Nathaniel, there are things money can't buy." Conversation over breakfast. Someone to carry the groceries when the wind's high. Sitting here now, that's worth more than an extra zero. Quirky fact: people who live in abundance sometimes forget that presence is a currency too. Joke 1, and it doesn't lose value when the market dips. He smiled faintly, but I caught a flicker in his eyes, like my words had landed somewhere deeper than his bank account. We moved on to safer topics: the weather, his work, the new cafe he'd invested in downtown. But every now and then I noticed his gaze drifting to the window where my small garden was still holding on to the last of its autumn color. Academic debate phrase popped into my mind: material sufficiency versus emotional sufficiency. He'd mastered the first, maybe at the expense of the second. After a while, I set out a plate of biscuits. "Stay for dinner," I offered. "No fuss, just stew and bread." He hesitated, checking his phone before tucking it away. "All right, I haven't had your stew in years." That was my opening. If he stayed long enough, he'd remember the taste of a meal served with both hands and no agenda. Dinner that night was nothing glamorous, just a pot of beef stew simmered since noon, bread still warm from the oven, and a salad from what was left in the garden. Old age wisdom: the taste of a meal is half in the recipe and half in the company. Nathaniel sat across from me, jacket draped over the back of his chair, tie loosened. He took his first spoonful and closed his eyes for a second. I'd forgotten he said, "It tastes like Sundays." "That's because it is a Sunday meal," I said. "Only difference is you're not 10 years old and trying to sneak bread rolls before the table's set." Quirky fact: nostalgia has a flavor and it's usually buttered. Joke 1, no one ever craves the taste of a low-fat childhood. Over dinner, I told him stories about his grandfather, how he worked double shifts at the shipyard, then came home to fix neighbors' fences just because they needed it. Nathaniel listened, hands folded loosely, a little crease forming between his brows. "You two never had much," he said, "but you sound content." "We had enough," I replied. "Enough is a choice, not a number." Academic debate phrase, perceived sufficiency versus imposed scarcity. One you own, the other owns you. We cleared the table together, which he did awkwardly, but without protest. As we dried dishes, I asked, "Do you remember the summer you stayed here without a TV?" He laughed. "Yeah, I thought I'd die of boredom. But I ended up reading every book in your den." "Exactly," I said. "Sometimes taking away what you're used to is the only way to see what's left." That's when I decided to propose something, an experiment that might just reset his compass. I poured us each another cup of tea and leaned back in my chair. "Nathaniel, I want to make you a proposal," I said. His brow lifted. "A business proposal or life proposal," I corrected. "Spend a weekend here, no staff, no car service, no deliveries. Just you, me, and the way I live. If the $8,000 a month is really about helping, then you ought to see what help looks like when it's not measured in transfers." Old age wisdom. The bigger the bank account, the more allergic someone can be to inconvenience. But sometimes inconvenience is exactly the medicine they need. He chuckled, but it was the nervous kind. "So, like a no-luxury challenge. Call it a reintroduction," I said, "to the things that built you before money did." Quirky fact, when you strip life down to basics, you find out quickly which habits are muscle and which are just padding. Joke 1, it's like discovering your favorite shirt only looks good in certain lighting. Nathaniel leaned back thinking. "All right," he said finally. "One weekend. But if I fail, you're not allowed to tell anyone." "Deal," I said, extending my hand across the table. He shook it like a contract signing. Academic debate phrase flickered in my mind. Experiential empathy training. No amount of conversation replaces the clarity of living someone else's reality even for a short time. We picked the date 2 weeks from now. I promised not to prep anything special, and he promised not to sneak in conveniences. As he left that night, the street light caught his face, and I thought I saw a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Quirky fact. Curiosity is the one luxury that gets richer the more you spend it. Joke 2, and it doesn't even need polishing. 2 weeks later, Nathaniel arrived for his no-luxury weekend with a single duffel bag and the expression of a man about to camp without a tent. Old age wisdom, you can tell a lot about someone by what they pack when told to bring only what you need. He'd left the sports car at home and taken the bus, already a victory. I met him at the door with a list in my hand. "We're starting with groceries," I said. "On foot." "On foot!" His voice held the same disbelief as when I'd once told him I'd never owned a dishwasher. Quirky fact, walking to buy your own food changes what you think you need. Joke 1, and it's the best anti-impulse buy strategy ever invented. We spent the afternoon cooking. He chopped onions badly while I prepped dough for bread. The kitchen smelled like yeast and rosemary by the time the loaves went in the oven. At one point, he asked why I didn't just buy bread at the store. Because I said this way, I know what's in it. And I get to keep the skill, not just the receipt. Academic debate phrase, retention of agency through skill preservation. The ability to do for yourself is a kind of wealth that can't be taxed. Later, I had him help in the garden, pulling weeds, trimming the mint before it spread too far. He knelt in the dirt awkwardly at first, then more comfortably, like he was remembering something his body used to know. By evening, we were both tired in the best way, the kind where you've actually earned sitting down. We ate our bread with soup and fresh salad, and Nathaniel admitted it tasted better than most of his restaurant meals. Quirky fact, effort is the secret ingredient you can't buy at any price. Joke 2, and it's always served warm. By morning, the house had that clean, quiet hum it gets when the only luxury available is time. Old age wisdom, the day goes better if you give it a chore to start and a story to end. So I handed Nathaniel both. We're washing linens, and tonight we're going to the community sing-along at the church hall. He stared like I'd just paired skydiving with dentistry. He carried the basket to the backyard with the solemnity of a pallbearer. "Where's the dryer?" he asked. "You're looking at it," I said, nodding at the clothesline, sunlit and patient. "Wind's free, so is sunshine." He clipped the first sheet crooked so the corner dragged the grass. I let him notice the mistake himself. Quirky fact, people remember a lesson longer when gravity gives it, not you. Joke 1, Sir Isaac Newton is still teaching laundry. The second try was better. By the third, he was smoothing fabric like a hotel housekeeper. We had a cash-only envelope for the weekend, $70, for groceries, bus fare, and anything else that might come up. I put it on the counter between us. This is our budget. No cards, no apps. He nodded, equal parts intrigued and unnerved. What happens if we run out? Then we do what humanity has always done. We stop buying things. He cracked a smile, but I saw relief rise when he realized the rules were honest and finite. We walked to the hardware store for a washer to fix the slow-dripping bathroom faucet, a leak I'd been meaning to tame. "You could just call a plumber," he said. "Sure," I replied, "and pay $150 to have a stranger twist what I can twist myself." Academic debate phrase. Cost-benefit analysis under constrained domestic economies. In other words, if the problem is small and your hands still work, you're rich already. Back home, I set him under the sink with a towel, a crescent wrench, and instructions. He learned the sacred order: turn off the water, put the stopper in the drain so you don't lose the screw. Then take a photo before you pull things apart. 10 minutes later, the drip was gone, and he wore the grin people reserve for their first bike ride, their first pie crust, their first decent haircut after a bad one. I fixed the thing, he said, almost shy. "Feels good because it's yours," I said. "The victory belongs to your hands." At midday, we cooked beans and rice with onions, garlic, and a heel of last night's bread toasted into croutons. He tasted it surprised. "This is $5 less," I said, "and still enough for seconds." Quirky fact, hunger is the best spice, but thrift is the second best. Joke hai paprika is third, sorry paprika. In the afternoon, I pointed him toward the library. "You want a map for life without paying admission? Start with a library card." Inside, he ran his fingers along the spines like a tourist in an old cathedral. We checked out a book on home repairs and another on local wildflowers. He looked at the stamped due date like it was a gentle promise. "I forget the world still runs on trust," he said. "It runs on people deciding to keep a calendar," I said. "Trust just gives them a reason." We sat in the reading room, which always smells faintly of paper and lemon oil, and I watched him sink into a chair, not because it cost money, but because it held him well. Back at home, we had an hour of no screens, my house rule in permanent ink. He fidgeted, then found the puzzle shelf. By the time the kettle sang, a border of blue sky had appeared on the card table, and his shoulders had dropped an inch. Old age wisdom attention is a muscle. The less you rent it out, the stronger it gets. The only real wobble came at 4:30 when the city sent a text alert of a brief power outage rolling through our street. The lights blinked, the fridge sighed, and Nathaniel sat up like someone had unplugged his certainty. "What about dinner?" "We'll be fine," I said, setting a cast iron skillet on the gas stove and striking a match. Civilization isn't measured by the sound your outlets make. He laughed, but it was a grateful sound, the kind that betrays a little fear walking away in its socks. We ate early frittata, built from garden-charred last night's potatoes, and a handful of cheese I'd frozen in a jar months ago for just such occasions. There's a smugness to a well-stocked pantry I've never apologized for. He took seconds, and then third forked a bite, like a kid who had forgotten he was raised on delivery apps. "Why does this taste so calm?" he asked. "Because none of it owes you a favor," I said. "Food keeps fewer receipts than people." At 6, lights full again, we walked to the church hall for the sing-along. He balked at the door. "Grandma, I can't sing." "Neither can we," I said. "But we're loud and neighborly." Inside, the folding chairs were set in rows, and a woman with a guitar, the same one who's been leading this since George W., was a fresh president, handed us song sheets. We sang, "You are my sunshine, and this land is your land." And I watched my grandson sing so quietly. At first, I couldn't hear him. Then, a little louder, when he realized no one was keeping score. A toddler clapped offbeat, and an old man harmonized like a broken radio. Somehow, the whole room sounded like mercy. Afterward, there were cookies and paper cups of lemonade, and the talk your soul only gets at places with bad coffee and good chairs. An electrician told Nathaniel about rewiring the community center for free after a storm. A nurse bragged about her tomatoes like they were grandchildren. Nathaniel listened, pockets empty of business cards, face emptied of the polite mask he wears in rooms that cost too much. He introduced himself not as a founder or investor, but as Grace's grandson. You could see the title fit him finally. On the walk home, he said quietly, "I haven't felt unimportant and okay with it in a long time." "Uncentered," I suggested. "The room didn't revolve around you, and it turned out the room still spun."
He nodded. "Yeah, that."
Back on the porch, our motion light clicked on with that little electric hiccup. He turned toward the dark street hands in pockets. "I'm thinking about the allowance," he said. "The $8,000 to $1,000. I thought I was solving a problem." "You were solving several and creating a different one," I said gently. "Money that only buys distance costs more than you think." He looked at me, then really looked. "What would helping look like if we redefined it?" "Ask me next weekend," I said. "After you've slept on this one, and after you've hauled your duffel back on the bus without a latte for company." Jokeba public transit runs on size and courage. He laughed, reached for the doorknob, and then paused. "Thank you for today," he said. "You earned it," I replied. "The work was yours." Before bed, he insisted on bringing in the dry sheets. He folded with the earnest awkwardness of a man inventing muscle memory. We made the bed together, tucking corners tight enough to bounce a nickel, his grandfather's old standard. He grinned when the coin popped. "That's absurdly satisfying." "Most honest things are," I said. In the quiet that followed, I wrote in my small notebook. He learned the weight of water and the worth of a wrench. He sang. He asked better questions. I put the pencil down and turned out the light. From the guest room came the soft, unmistakable sound of a man falling asleep without a screen to lean on. The house held him the way it holds all of us who stop pretending comfort needs an app. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its familiar chorus, distant train, a dog protesting the moon, the wind rehearsing tomorrow's weather in the maple leaves. And in here, wealth admired its reflection in a clean, simple mirror and didn't look away. By Sunday morning, the house smelled like percolating coffee and fresh air. Old age wisdom mornings are gentler when they begin with a scent instead of a screen. Nathaniel wandered into the kitchen in jeans and a t-shirt, no watch, no phone in sight, looking like the version of him I remembered from years ago. "I was going to check the news," he said, "but I ended up reading that home repair book instead." "Better headlines," I said, handing him a mug. Over breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast from yesterday's bread, and strawberries from the market. I gave him the day's plan: a trip to the flea market, a stop at the park, and a simple dinner cooked together. Quirky fact: a flea market is part museum, part gamble, and part storytelling booth. Joke 1 plus, it's the only place where $5 can buy both a tool and a ghost. At the market, he was fascinated by the vendors, people selling everything from handmade soaps to 1940s postcards. He lingered at a stall with old vinyl records, chatting with the seller about jazz from before either of them were born. I watched him slow down, listen, and ask real questions. Academic debate phrase: immersive engagement in non-transactional environments. In plain terms, being somewhere without the pressure to spend big changes the way you connect. We walked back through the park where kids were playing soccer and someone was flying a kite high enough to tangle with the clouds. Nathaniel stopped to watch, smiling in that unguarded way I hadn't seen since he was little. At dinner, we made vegetable stir-fry with rice, eating straight from bowls while leaning against the counter. He told me about pressures at work, the constant expectation to be on to project and image to outpace even his own comfort. Quirky fact: sometimes people only admit their loneliness when their hands are busy. Joke 2: and chopping carrots is cheaper than therapy. That's when I knew the weekend was working. After dinner, we sat on the porch with the lights off, letting the evening wrap around us. Old age wisdom: sometimes the best conversations happen when you can't see each other's faces clearly. It loosens the guard. Nathaniel rested his elbows on his knees. You know, Grandma, I thought sending money was enough. It's easy. And it makes me feel like I'm doing something. You were doing something, I said. But you were missing the part that costs more than cash your time. He nodded slowly. It's weird. Out there in my world, generosity is a transaction. Even when it's for charity, there's a gala, a photo, a social media post. This weekend, there's no audience, just you and me. Quirky fact: remove the applause and you'll find out who's still willing to play. Joke 1: standing ovations are easier than washing dishes. I told him about the years after his grandfather passed, how the quiet could feel heavy if no one came by, even just to sit. Money can't fix that. Only people can. He leaned back, looking at the sky. Maybe I've been using money as a shortcut, like I can buy my way out of feeling guilty for not showing up. Academic debate phrase: substitution of financial capital for relational capital. A costly swap that rarely delivers the same return. We sat there for a long time, the air cooling the street lamp, painting the sidewalk gold. Finally, Nathaniel said, let's rethink the $8,000. I still want to help, but maybe not like that. What if I visit every month instead? Spend the weekend, do what we've been doing. Quirky fact: the richest offers are the ones that double as promises. Joke 2: and they don't even need notarizing. That was the moment I knew something in him had shifted for good. The next morning, Nathaniel helped me make pancakes from scratch. No mix, just flour, eggs, milk, and a pinch of cinnamon. Old age wisdom. The simplest recipes are the ones that stay with you because they taste like places you can come back to. As he flipped a pancake successfully this time, he said, I've been thinking about what you said last night. I don't just want to visit more. I want to be part of things here. Part of things, I asked. He nodded. Like helping with the garden, fixing what needs fixing, even going with you to that sing-along again. He grinned sheepishly. I kind of liked it. Quirky fact: people will sometimes return to the things that made them uncomfortable just to prove they belong there now. Joke 1: and sometimes because they want another cookie afterward. Over breakfast, we mapped out a loose plan. He'd still help financially, but in smaller amounts, enough for extras rather than essentials. The real gift would be his presence a weekend every month with one project and one outing each time. Academic debate phrase: mutual contribution framework. Both sides bring something tangible and something intangible to the table. Later, we walked to the bus stop together. He carried his duffel in one hand, a bag of leftover pancakes in the other. You know, he said this weekend felt real. I wasn't just a visitor. I was here. At the corner, the bus pulled up. He hugged me longer than usual and said, see you next month, Grandma. For real. Quirky fact: a promise feels different when you already believe it. Joke 2: and the bus schedule is the least romantic part of it. As I watched him go, I realized we traded one kind of wealth for another and come out ahead. A month later, Nathaniel returned, same bus route, same duffel bag, but this time with a toolbox under his arm. Old age wisdom: when someone brings their own tools, they're planning to stay in more ways than one. We spent the weekend repairing a sagging fence in the backyard. He measured, sawed, and hammered with a focus I hadn't seen in years. Between swings of the hammer, he asked about his grandfather's old workshop, the one we'd packed away after the funeral. I told him it was still there, waiting for someone to make noise in it again. Quirky fact: silence in a workshop is heavier than dust. Joke one: and sawdust smells like memory when you stir it up. In the evenings, we cooked together: pasta one night, roast chicken the next. No reservations, no valet parking, just the two of us moving around the kitchen in an easy rhythm. On Sunday, we walked to the library for a community lecture on local history. Nathaniel listened intently, even taking notes. "You've got good stories here," he said afterward. "The kind that don't make it into magazines but matter anyway." Academic debate phrase: localized cultural capital. It's the wealth you carry when you know where you are and who you're with. When it was time for him to leave, he set down the duffel and toolbox, hugging me with both arms. "This what we're doing, it feels better than writing checks," he said. I smiled. "That's because you're not just sending help, you are the help." Quirky fact: the best kind of wealth is the kind that shows up in work clothes. Joke two: and doesn't mind getting blisters. As the bus pulled away, I stood on the porch, feeling the quiet in my bones. Not the lonely kind, but the kind that says, someone will be back. And that to me was worth far more than $8,000 a month. Grace Whitman's wealthy grandson, Nathaniel, visits unexpectedly and asks if the $8,000 monthly allowance he sends is helping. Grace answers honestly it does, but his time and presence matter more. Over dinner, she shares stories of her late husband's work ethic, planting the idea that money isn't the only form of support. She challenges Nathaniel to spend a weekend living simply without the conveniences his wealth affords. During the weekend, Nathaniel experiences life without luxury, walking to shop for groceries, cooking from scratch, gardening, repairing a leaky faucet, and attending a community sing-along. These moments shift his perspective, revealing the emotional value of connection, shared work, and community. As they talk, Nathaniel admits he's been using money as a shortcut for genuine involvement, a substitute for showing up. Together, they agree to redefine help: smaller financial contributions supplemented by monthly visits, shared projects, and participation in Grace's community activities. The arrangement deepens their bond. In subsequent visits, Nathaniel brings his own tools, repairs Grace's fence, joins her at local events, and learns family stories. The experience transforms his understanding of wealth, moving it from a transactional concept to one rooted in presence and contribution. Grace's story isn't about rejecting financial help, it's about balancing it with human connection. She teaches Nathaniel that true generosity is not measured by the size of a check, but by the willingness to show up, get your hands dirty, and invest time in the people you love. In the end, both of them discover they've traded one form of wealth for another and come out richer in ways no bank statement could capture.